We will wait just 5 more minutes and then we'll get started. Okay, hello. I think this time slot is a bit complicated. After a whole day, I know some people start with meetings early in the morning during breakfast, so at 6 p.m. we're quite tired. But we're here. So this is the data gathering and analysis BOF, and I wanted to start with defining what's a BOF. Is there anyone in the room who's attending a BOF for the first time? Hands? Yeah. Do you know what a BOF is? What it means? So BOF comes from the expression birds of a feather fly together. So the idea is that it's an informal space for open discussion about a common topic of interest. I don't think it's necessary with this small group, but I will just mention that I want to ask you to please be nice to each other. If there are comments, let's respect each other. Sometimes BOFs end up being some like discussion over the mics, so please don't make disrespectful comments. Let's just be nice. We have a code of conduct if you need some guidance on that. Some background. We have every 2 years survey we run not just with members but also with other stakeholders. And in 2016, we had 80% people who said they were interested in contributing data, either about infrastructure or also about like technical business. The idea was to get a better understanding of the internet ecosystem in the region. Then last year in 2018, we had another survey, and more than 50% expressed an interest in internet trend and benchmarking information. A lot of answers were about network security. It's like there's a lot of interest around that, and we've been trying to respond. We've been doing a lot in that space, but also about network infrastructure, topology and usage, and use of network and specific technologies. Of new and specific technologies. So we've had already 4 sessions of this data gathering and analysis BOF, and we've been exploring ideas in this area. So this particular BOF is about initiatives that involve collecting data from different data sources, analyzing it, and providing interesting insights to the community. So the agenda, I will use some time to talk about the products in my product family. I manage the information services product family at APNIC, and because they are about sharing information, I thought it's adequate to this BOF. Then we will have Tim from NLNet Labs sharing about a study he's doing on RPKI uptake and data quality, and Anurag from Hurricane Electric telling us a bit about some challenges he has experienced collecting data for BGP route filtering. So, changing hats from moderator to speaker, a quick update on the information services product family at APNIC. I presented earlier today at the products and services session. The clicker is not working. It doesn't respond very well. So if you were at the products and services session, this will sound familiar. If you were not, I'm happy you're here. So my product family, again, is called information services. And when we talk about information, I sometimes ask myself, what do we need so much information for? And I think, well, if you have a lot of information, if you have good information, you can answer some good questions. So my presentation on my products is focused on, okay, what are the questions we are trying to answer with the products we are working on? So one of my products is the Internet Directory, and the question that product answers is, how are the Internet number resources being distributed in the Asia-Pacific region? Another product, and I love this one because it's like my little baby, we have the first minimum viable product for this one, and it's about network security. As I was saying, we have lots of initiatives around network security, and this one is one of those. Its name is DASH, Dashboard for Autonomous System Health, and the question it's trying to answer is if your network, the user's network, is sending malicious traffic. And last one, I wouldn't call it a product yet, it's some ideas of things maybe APNIC could do to help network operators. So it's like, how can we do that? And we're, again, just exploring ideas. I'm running this week some interviews to do that. So this is APNIC's new Internet Directory. Last year in September, we launched a new version, and then in November, a major release with some new features. A comparison feature that allows to, using checkboxes, select more than one economy and compare how different resources have been distributed in those different economies. Then another feature about visualization of how autonomous systems are interconnected in a specific economy. That's based in visas. This is a separate thing we already had, a kind of a product that we brought into the Internet Directory. And finally, the web components. All the charts you will find in the Internet Directory are now widgets that you can embed anywhere. If you find a chart you like, tells a story, you are doing something about, you have some study about it, and you want to embed it in a blog post or in your web page, you can embed that as a widget. And for this product, this week, I'm running some usability testing sessions. And the idea is to know from the community, people who are using the Internet Directory or who could have an interest in it, what do you think? Any feedback is welcome. So if you want to provide feedback, if you have an interest in this product, please let me know. The network security product, as I mentioned, is called DASH, Dashboard for Autonomous System Health. And this is a screenshot of this minimum viable product. So this first small version we have of this product. It shows for a member, space holder, information about how many hits we're seeing coming from those networks to the honeypots that are part of APNIC's community honeypots project. So for this one, we are also doing usability testing sessions this week. So if you would like to participate, please let me know. And finally, as I was saying, it's not a product yet. Some ideas of things we could do to help network operators to make their life easier. We are running interviews to understand this. So I have some hypotheses on things I think we could do. First thing is we identified with some interviews we had during the last APNIC meeting in New Caledonia, that when network operators deal with routing issues, they usually experience communication difficulties. So it's interesting how my hypothesis on the main difficulty being mostly technical, and that we could do something about that, offer more BGP data, for example, it seems that that's not the case, that the main difficulty is usually around communications. So we are now trying to understand that better with these interviews. And the other hypothesis is that there is some AS level information that we could provide that network operators could use to make better informed network decisions. So as I was saying, I'm running some interviews, so if you're a network operator, if you want to talk to us about your experience, about frustrations, difficulties you experience in your day-to-day job, please let me know and we can schedule some time to talk about that. So with that, are there any questions about my products, about things we are doing in this space from APNIC? Okay. Is everyone very tired? Did I speak too fast? Or is it just that it was too clear? I will try to stay with that it was too clear. So with that, I will ask Tim to come then to present about his study on RPK uptake. Thanks.
All right, good evening or morning or whatever time zone you're from, everybody. Yeah, I wanted to talk about, well, Sophie asked me if I wanted to join this BOF and talk a bit, and then, well, if you know me, see me speak before, RPKI is kind of my thing, but I try to also think about it in the context of data gathering. It's a relatively new thing for me, personally, to do it in a structured way, let's say. I've used to work at RIPE-NCC, but I've joined AnelNet Labs just over half a year ago. And there, the AnelNet Labs was traditionally involved in many DNS applications, but with my arrival, we've also started to work on RPKI. And what we're quite interested in is the analysis of how RPKI matches what is going on in BGP, but also how that, let me move on to maybe the next slide. It's the green one, right? It's me, it's not the machine. So what we're interested in is a time series, essentially. So there is this data that's being gathered by various sources all over time, and we'd like to understand, you know, how things, not just how things are today, but how things were and how things evolve. We're working together with some other people. So working together, for example, with Emil Aben at RIPE-NCC, because RIPE-NCC has been gathering the RPKI repositories, and we made an agreement about that we're careful with private data and all that. But we have access to that so that we can do analysis. Also, there are IP delegations on the NRO and RAR websites and FTP servers that we can use. So we don't have to invent all this stuff ourselves, right? There's data sources out there that we can rely on. We're also working together with Taejong, who's looking at this from a more academic point of view. So he wants to really go all sciencey on this. That's not really my field. I find it interesting, but my day job is writing RPKI code, essentially. So I'm focusing more on the high-level picture here. So with that, I'm not sure if this is needed, but a very quick recap of what this RPKI thing is all about. It's about securing the origination of routing, at least in its present usable form. So the idea being that if a ROA is issued for a specific AS number and prefix up to a certain length, then announcements that that basically align with that ROA are considered valid, and if things are not in alignment with any ROA, then they are invalid. There's sometimes a confusion about ROA validity versus root validity, and there is a difference, an important difference. So in the RFCs, they talk about validated ROA prefixes all the time, which essentially means you have a ROA object, and there can be multiple prefixes on that object. If that ROA object is valid, then those prefixes are added to your list of validated ROA prefixes. That's what you use, or what the routers use in decision process. If the ROA object is invalid, then those things are simply not added. And to evaluate roots, a root would be considered valid if there's at least one validated ROA prefix that agrees with it. If there's nothing that agrees with it, but there are ROAs that cover the same prefix, and even the same ASN, but not up to the length of the actual announcement, then the length is invalid. And if all the ROAs that are there for this prefix are about other ASNs, then the ASN is invalid. Now, another thing to note here, in many stats and also on your router, you won't see this difference because the RFCs literally don't distinguish. Both are cases that would allow people to attack a route. So the final state, though, is, but I do mention it because it is very useful in debugging issues. Right? So that's why I think it's good to present people with the difference. So the final issue is, and that applies to a lot of, yes? The mic? All right, I couldn't hear you, but right. So the final state is, and that applies to a lot of prefixes, if there are no validated ROA prefixes matching that prefix, and matching means exact match or bigger, then it's marked as not found. So going on, securing routing stats. So this is hot off the, the keyboard, I guess. It's available in GitHub. I'm working on a thing that takes input files. Essentially, there's no crypto going on in this tool. It just takes ROAS, it takes announcements, and there's a, well, if you download the slides, you can actually read it. A location where you can find, in this case, dumps of the RIS route collectors. And the ROA stats are also used, but I'll go into more detail in that in a moment. It's BSD license, and yeah, sure. Please have a look if you are interested, and let me know in person, comments, issues, anything works. Then, getting more to the data gathering point. So, that's actually future work. I'll get to that. What it does now is it can analyze the situation today. What I want to work towards is time series, as I mentioned. But okay, what is the method behind all this? Well, you loop over, essentially you just loop over all the announcements, then you find the validated robot prefixes that are relevant, so you can evaluate validity. Now the delegations file that I use, which is published by the RARs together, essentially I just use it to have an indication of which country this prefix was issued in. That may not be 100% accurate with the situation today, but it is a good big picture, let's say. And then we analyze. So this is basically the result, and yeah, this is a coverage of the present state today, and in terms of percentage of prefixes for a given country that are covered by RPKI. There's some high numbers in here, there's some low numbers in here. The highest that I found was Ecuador. They're really way up there. But in other places you see uptake also happening. And like I said, it would be really interesting to see how this goes, develops over time until now, and looking forward as well, of course. Now this is another metric that I think is interesting, and because you could argue that uptake is important to make this data usable as a decision point. But what's also really important, and maybe even more important, is how well it matches the actual BGP that we see. Because if there's a big difference, then probably something is wrong. If differences are very small, however, then you don't know if it's a problem in routing, because really that's the holder of this resource would not want that route to be up there, or that is a misconfiguration. So you have to be a bit careful about that. But if we look at the world, so for the most part, the numbers are pretty high. What I probably need to spend more analysis on, or maybe somebody else can do it, is how does it correlate? Because my gut feeling is that the lower scores tend to come from places where this is in an early days, in initial deployment. Maybe people set it up, but kind of forget about it because they do it alongside other things and it's not part of their process yet. But finally, another remark here is that in places where invalid routes are actually being dropped, and that's increasingly happening in Europe, there is a strong pressure to fix things. So once people have decided that, okay, the data quality is good enough for us to start doing the validation side of this, invalids may indeed occur, but typically what happens then is that either the ROAS get fixed, and that happens, I would think, in about, well, it's also interesting to see actually in the future, a good point of research, like what the balance is here. But I would say 50-50 people, or maybe even better, people do fix their ROAS. But otherwise, the alternative is, well, remove your ROA. If you cannot make sure that it really matches what you do in BGP, then you're doing more, more bad than good by having that. So that's the other option that people have. Then the other thing that this little small tool does is a report of details of invalidity, let's say, and totals of validity. You can run it for all resources or for a specific set of resources to get a scoped report. Now, this is all just stuff that is basically today, but in the context of data gathering, I think it's interesting to see, what can we do with this towards the future. So, like I said, I really like to work on a time series, looking back, but also looking from now on, looking forward. There's already people who have services with information about routes that have been seen in the past. We have data about the ROAS that have been seen in the past, so that is something that we want to look into, how we could make that available as well. What we could do is retroactively validate everything and make reports about the validity of routes over time. So that's all interesting things, but I'd also really like to know if, what people out there find interesting. Then, of course, other sources. There are other sources that we can look at. Or do you know of other sources that we should look at? Is there an interest in running something like this as a service that you may want to look at? Missing features, other analysis. I'd be very curious to hear your feedback. So, and that's really it for this. So, any questions or comments here or online or in the corridor? All good.
Before clapping your hands, questions, comments. We have a very shy and quiet audience today. I know we're all tired, but back to the definition of a BOF, this is a space for discussion. And because you don't have questions, I will have questions for the audience. Who thinks of themselves as technical here? Technical people? And who thinks of themselves as researchers? And who thinks of themselves as both? Okay, so we have some researchers, we have some technical. Those who don't think of yourself or technical or technical or researchers, what do you think of yourselves? Comments, questions? Okay, so my question is, this is a data gathering and analysis BOF, and the idea is to, what do you think of yourself?
I have a question, and I thought to reach Mike, even though the room is small, but probably we are webcasting, so it makes more sense to use Mike. Anurag Bhatia from Hurricane Electric. What do you think about bogons? And it's related because right now, if I understand correctly, there's no way to find bogons easily for filtering. And probably RPKIN can help here if this is something which folks from Internet Society and some other organizations are proposing to have a route object for all the address space with like.
I think, George, you can take this one, right?
You want to reply before George adds his comments?
I'm just looking at the data here. So issuing objects that essentially say you should not route this is something that as a resource holder you can do for your own resources. If you're asking the RARs to make statements, then I think maybe George should.
Because this is something I ask myself as an operator. Well, if any of our member loses a registration, does our system stop the service? Right now, I think answer is no, and that's a problem, right?
Well,
hello.
Maybe George, you can go first.
So. This is George from APNIC, who, strangely enough, had a conversation with AFTAB yesterday about this topic. Bogons divide into 2 or 3 categories that it is useful to think of. There are many others, but these are 3 useful categories. There are the bogons of networks that simply should not exist in public routing disposition because they've been marked not for use. The documentation prefix, the private address ranges, other blocks, 240/4 until such time as its disposition is understood. So IANA has moment of force here under the guidance of the IETF, and such time as IANA says these are not reachable, you can hypothesize, and this is AFTAB, so I am not speaking for him, but I'm giving you a sense of what he said to me. You could hypothesize a well-formed instruction. Dear RIRs, please issue and maintain AS0 blockers for the following things that should not be seen in public routing. Thank you, the IETF. So if we were given an instruction for these things that are clearly marked, don't do it, that's easy. That's box 1. Box 2 is, well, you guys maybe don't think these are bogons, but we think they're bogons, and they are specifically the ASs that randomly originate things that shouldn't be seen in public. So the address might be completely legitimate in use, but the originating AS appears to be a little wrong. Sometimes it's fat fingers and it magically becomes a wraparound in 32 bits and it's the last AS number in the 4-byte AS range. Sometimes it's the private ASs. The problem is there is nothing like a rower to say this is noise. So regarding the AS mistakes that are in path and origination, nothing we can do. Now comes the 3rd category. Long ago, in a universe far away, Team Cymru started announcing, using various techniques, their vision of the things that should not be seen. I think they were null routing them. And it was a service you could subscribe to, and you would acquire, through Team Cymru, knowledge of things that shouldn't be seen, and they would disappear into the bucket. Gone. And someone said, oh, you should do that. And inside the RIR tent, some of us spoke. Now, we don't have moment of force, because what we do is what the community wants. But what we said was, wow, can you imagine if we got that wrong? Can you imagine the moment where on a Friday a hostmaster assigns an urgent prefix to a member, we forget to update the black hole database, and for 72 hours it's unroutable because we didn't withdraw the repudiation? That's material damage to a member. Or we keystroke wrong. It's analogous to mistakes in RPKI. If you are high enough in the apex of a tree of distribution of resource and you intrude into routing and you make statements actively about things coming and going, you have moments of change that are high risk. Now at that time, back in that time, what we said inside the tent was, I don't think we want to do it. But it's not to say we couldn't be asked to do it, and it's not to say we can't even conceptualize, given our PKI, how we would do it. But you need to think about the other side of the cycle. All things that are repudiated in general global unicast address, after an 18-month period, probably come back into life. You have to do both sides of the deal. It's harder. That was it.
Thank you, George. Anurag, does that answer your question? Do you have any other comment on that?
That's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to you. So back to me.
Sophia,
Yeah.
I do have one other comment on this, actually,
Please.
if I may. So looking at this from another angle, what you can do today is you can use your own filters and whitelists on some of the validators. There's a standard which was funnily named SLURM, basically means local exceptions, let's say. And it's supported by the RIPE-NC RPKI validator and by Routinator at least. I'm not sure of the other ones. There's a couple of new kids on the block. Yes, Ripster as well. But I don't know about the Octo RPKI thing that is fresh out of Cloudflare, and I don't know of the effort to make one for OpenBSD, if they're supporting this already. But in any case, you can then use this to say, I don't want to see any private addresses, for example. And you can also use this to add your own things there. So if you want to do this locally, then you can.
There are actually, George again, there are actually many, many reasons why that local trust anchor model is very interesting for a number of people, because it can go to exposure of risk to outside actors. It can make your integral routing much stronger. There are things that people want to say in their internal BGP, their IBGP, that they can't make ROAs for because you can't legally make a ROA over certain things. So construction of a state which has a local trust anchor, it's completely in the model. And you can use it to repudiate things, but you can also use it to include things in positive ways. Yes. So it's a good idea, it's good engineering. I don't like the name, but the technology is fine.
Yes, I mean, it's sometimes referred to as local trust anchor, but you don't need, basically it's just JSON. So you're not running an actual trust anchor for
and
this
it matches quite nicely practice that people in routing do
semantics.
currently, which is that they all have their magic lists, their white lists, their black lists, that they apply over the information they gather from other sources. So this is very similar. It fits.
No, but I just wanted to make clear that you don't have to run a local CA or anything to use these exceptions. It's a JSON file, so that's a bit easier.
Okay, thanks, Tim. We still have one more speaker, but before asking him to come on stage, what I wanted to ask the audience was, either if you think yourself as someone technical or as a researcher or as both, this BOF is to discuss possibilities of things we could do with data. So after all the explanation with bogons and RPKI, I think it's clear the power of making information available, consuming information, how you make it available, how you consume it. So I would like to ask you to, during Anurag's presentation, pay attention with a different focus. Think if you would be a consumer of that data, if you would be a consumer of the raw data, or and not just about what he will talk, but also what I mentioned of my products and what Tim was talking about. So the idea here is to discuss what can we do? What can we do as a community? What can we do from APNIC to offer you data you could use? You could perform your own analysis. You could make decisions based on that. So that after Anurag's presentation, we can have an open discussion about all the things we could do with data. So please, Anurag. Thanks.
So it's already evening and I don't have slides. It makes more sense to talk rather than have everyone focus on slides. Everyone is anyway so tired. And just on unrelated notes, I always find it very fascinating the way, whatever I'm speaking just comes in text. It's just amazing. So I'll talk a bit about the route filtering. I'll give you the background. I belong to Hurricane Electric. We run a multi-terabit backbone across all continents. We have over 190 POPs at this point of time, and we connect to over 200 exchanges. So in terms of route filtering, it was a tedious task when we started looking at implementing large-scale route filtering across our backbone. And data gathering becomes important because what would you use? So to start with, what would you use for route filtering? One, RPKI. Well, that's new technology, excellent option, but there's still extremely low number of prefixes with signed ROAs. So will it going to make an impact or not? At this point of time, when we looked at it, it's just probably, last time when I checked, it's 5% of prefixes with ROAs, and it didn't really make sense to start with. We started looking at the route filtering from perspective of using IRRs, which are full of junk, but still somewhat a source of truth, if I may say so. So we started looking at the IRR data. We started comparing the data coming from IRR for various peers as well as our downstreams, and we found it a bit weird. It's just lots and lots of crap filled in. We are talking about over 100,000 prefixes we route on V4. a large part of the customer down the chain, we find still have, say, a mismatching route object, or would have a missing route object altogether, or maybe everything is correct but still misses being in the AS set of the upstream provider. So we built a complicated algorithm to take care of that. That is, you implement route filtering, keeping a preference on the IRR, but you also allow things like your customer prefixes, which are given to you in written over a ticket when you set them up. You look at their maintainers on the RIRs and allow them. For a large set of our peering sessions, those options were not available. So at this point of time, we have over 7,000 adjacencies in over 26,000 BGP sessions, and a large number of our peers, we had implicit filters. We were denying certain things but accepting everything else. So the goal of this practice was to make sure that we put explicit filters, and it works if our peers had their AS sets published in the peering DB, but it's still a problem because a large number of our peers still would not have a peering DB record at all, or maybe would have a peering DB record but would not mention AS set, or worse, they would have a peering DB record, have AS set, but would not have their customers' ASN in the AS set. So that's about the data gathering for the filtering. So we ended up in filtering over 98% of our BGP sessions. With our peers, it's strictly based on IRR, and we are trying to filter as many sessions as we can. So what we are not filtering is mostly the super large sessions where prefix announcements are, say, over 3,000. But for anything smaller than that, we built out tools internally to collect the data based on the route objects, based on the AS sets which are defined in there, and built out prefix lists, and then push them across our backbone on regular basis. We also made this information public. So if you are one of our peer or downstream, or just interested in any of our peer or downstream, you can go to routing.he.net, and you can just put in the ASN, and you'll find the prefix list as well as the algorithm we are using for the route filtering. A large part of data gathering for this is problematic because IRR are not program centric. It's still query based on who is, with lots of text coming in and lots of scripts just scrapping around that data instead of, say, a reply in a more programming fashion. Plus, some of the IRRs like RADB would essentially mirror lots of other IRRs, and some of the other IRRs just would add proxy objects. So if you look at the total size of the output, it's just huge at times, and you can always end up in allowing lots and lots of unexpected ASNs if you try to build filter out of it. So that's about it. Just out of curiosity, anyone here who has an ASN, can you raise hand? And how many of you have registered a route object for your prefixes? Anyone here who has no idea what a route object or a AS set or IRR is? Probably we have quite technical audience for the session. Any questions about it?
Anurag.
Yeah.
Sanjaya from APNIC. Just a question: when you implement your route filter finally, whatever rules that you use, do you know how many bad routes did you manage to filter out, percentage-wise or numbers?
So we did not calculate it in percentage or number-wise, but I can tell you it saves from accidental route leaks for now. So that should be one major gain. And the other part is, if you look at the whole routing table, not just with our set of customers, we do have considerable amount of routing table on the customer side. But if you look at the overall routing table on V4 and V6, you'll find a large number of prefixes are still without a route object, or have a route object which mismatches the ASN because, say, the company is acquired and the company who acquired it just started using their ASN without modifying the route object. So I think we are filtering a large set of our peers at this point of time because of that problem. But on the customer side, we do have certain other mechanisms to make sure that we don't end up in blackholing our customers' traffic who are still not having correct IRR route objects. I personally worked on it and contacted many of our customers, but it becomes hard for a backbone operator where it's not the problem with your customer, but problem with the customer's customer. And many of our customers would not be happy if we start contacting their customer base and start talking about filtering.
Sorry, just one more. I'm just thinking that maybe this we can combine Sophia's idea of making it easier to communicate with AS that is not adjacent to you, you know, because I think that is one of her hypotheses is most people are having problem if they want to check something with an AS that is like further away. How do you facilitate that communication, and would that actually help in verifying if that is indeed a proper
I would have a
advertisement?
feature request actually for APNIC on that regards. I think you send regular emails to the holders to verify that whose data is correct. Maybe it might be a good idea to add an option where you validate AS sets and not AS sets, but the route objects belonging to the ASN or to the resources, and just say this is what we see on the route object versus this is what we see in the routing table, and it's all good, thanks. Or maybe just add a notification if it does not matches, because APNIC would of course be a neutral body to contact all the ASNs and not an upstream provider like us.
Yeah, Tim Bruijsels, NL Labs. I wanted to say something about, so have you looked at stale objects? Because I like those world maps I showed earlier. I've actually run them also for IRR objects in the past, and what is not shown here and not implemented by the present tool, but what I've done in the past is also look at, okay, which authorizations don't seem to have to do anything with what's going on with routing today. And that happens both in RPKI and in IRR, but in IRR it's quite a lot of them, I would say, up to 50% even, from what I saw. And I think this happens because, well, when there is no route object, then stuff gets dropped. So there is an incentive to add, but there's not really an incentive to clean up. And yeah, I don't think this is great, but do you have ideas about, like, is this something you run into, and do you have ideas about if this is a problem for you?
I think it's a problem if you look at the IRRs beyond the IRRs run by the routing registries. It's a problem, but we don't have a solution for that as yet. I'm more hopeful with things like more implementation of RPKI, especially, which is tightly integrated with the next version of the IRR engine, where you do a validation of a route object with the ROA. I think at this point of time, we would really hope that various routing registries start running, some kind of scripts where they figure out the mismatching route objects and start contacting the people who have added those route objects. But yes, it's full of junk.
Yes, sounds interesting. Sounds interesting.
Anyone else in the room who got in trouble with filtering, or you just don't filter, just reject few things and accept everything? By the way, I have interesting experience to share about the network over here for the conference network. Yesterday, I heard about them having problem with IPv6, and the network or the conference network is connected to a provider which connects to us. And I found that we were learning the routes over a bilateral session, an IPv6/32 over a bilateral session, while we were learning a more specific route over a session at an exchange, not directly. It was an interesting case because apparently someone started announcing a 48 without registering a route object, and we were filtering it. So it was nice proof of concept that, things just work and we do filter that. We are still not filtering all the route servers because essentially the way we rolled out the route filtering was with the way we would start with the peers who are originating very small amount of prefixes and then go large, and up to a point where you reach few thousand prefixes for the filtering. I don't think it makes sense right now to have a filter list for super large peers and just match each and everything which they are having, because they would still have certain customers who won't be having correct route objects, and we would end up in black holing them. While they are not intentionally leaking things or making misuse of resources, but it is just due to the lack of knowledge, and we don't want to penalize them by just doing a hard filter on them at this point of time.
Thanks, Anurag. So people from the audience, back to my questions to you. Is there anyone, the researchers in the room, are you doing any research related to what we've been discussing today? Or technical people in the room, are you acting on data, collecting your own data, making decisions based on that? Have you experienced any challenges you would like to share with us? Do you have any experience you would like to share with us today? Okay. We still have time, and again, back to the definition of a BOF, this is supposed to be a space for open discussion. But I guess that if there are no questions or no more comments, I would thank the speakers, and we can adjourn, go have some rest. I think we're all tired. Thanks for being here today.